Welcome. We'll let some folks trickle in here before we get started. Hi, John, Tim.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Hi, Maxine. Letting some folks trickle in here, so we'll get started here in a second. Hi, Albert. I should really just configure this so people can just jump in without this whole waiting room thing. Hi, Brooke.
Eric.
So I wanted to, while we're waiting for folks to jump in here, my assistant, she sent out a calendar invite. I just want to take a quick poll here. Was that super annoying for folks, or was that useful or handy? Useful, Tim. Okay. This went out to a bunch of, okay, awesome. Okay, good to know. I get these sometimes, and sometimes it's a little bit of sort of imposing, but some folks find that it is helpful. So we got a few complaints about it, and so it was quite a minority of folks, but just wanted to kind of gauge that a little bit. All right. Okay, I think we have a quorum here. Some other folks will trickle in, I'm sure. Usually that happens, but for folks that are first timers here, quick raise of hands, first timers. Okay, awesome. Are most of you folks coming from the NSA, the Never Search Alone community? Okay, cool. Cool. All right. I'll just give a brief intro here. So my name is Eric. I do this on a weekly basis. Um, I've spent the past, gosh, 12 years now in a recruiting capacity, being a third-party recruiter that helps companies find and recruit and hire talent. Most of the companies that I've worked with have been startups and growth stage companies. And I've done everything from executive level down to senior level individual contributor. For the past year, I was part of the Never Search Alone community, and I moderated two job search councils. So I'm familiar with the process. Those councils have since moved on, and they found their positions. Um, and you might be asking why I was part of that Never Search Alone community to begin with. Recruiting's been pretty tough, particularly in the um in the tech space for the past 2 years. And I was thinking about going back into product management, which was in a former life. I was in product management and software development and engineering. And so I've had a bit of an eclectic sort of career path. But anyway, so I've been part of the NSA. I'm familiar with the sort of the playbook and the process. And one thing that I found that's prompted me to start this. I think I did this. I think I started this back in March of last year. Is I found that there's a lot of either misconceptions or just a lack of insight into what goes on as part of the recruiting process. And some of those insights I've found to be really helpful for folks that are navigating their job search. And so I felt that a little bit of insight could go a long way. And also I get a lot of inbound of folks, asking me to help them with their search, and they have specific case scenarios and this and that. And so I was like, okay, I'll just set up some time on a weekly basis and can knock out some of these questions, and hopefully it can help a larger group of folks. So that said, the way I usually host this is just I don't really have much of a program. It's just sort of an ask me anything kind of thing. And so I welcome folks to just, ask questions or just present your scenario. And I'm happy to provide you my insight as, from the perspective of a recruiter. and hopefully that'll help you with some perspective that can again help you make make better decisions and so forth. All right, so feel free to just go old school and just mention, just share with me or in the group your question, either verbally or you can just drop it into the chat, whatever's helpful, and then we'll just try to navigate that. So I usually spend about half an hour. Sometimes I go a little bit over, um, but yeah, that's that. So what questions do you guys have?
I have a
Hey,
question.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Sian? Cian, am
Oh,
I
yeah,
pronouncing that
yeah.
correctly?
Ian, yeah.
Cian.
Yeah, nice to meet everyone. I'm in the UX field, and yeah, so I've been looking for several months now. And my question, I guess I have a couple questions, but first one is like, so is there like a length of unemployment that kind of start to kind of raise questions to the recruiters? And let's say when I apply, I've had like people ask me like, "Oh, have you been looking the whole time?" Like things like that. Um, I guess like, is there some kind of like stigma or things that attached with like the unemployment? Because I mean, we all know that like the all the layoffs is like all over the news, right? So it's
Yeah.
not a surprise. But then at the same time, it's like how, I guess, what's like a way to respond to it, or what's like a good way to react to
Yeah.
the question?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of a strange time right now over the past 2 years, particularly in tech, again, which is kind of where I've been focused in terms of our recruiting services. So to see an extended sort of time frame, I think one is just know that you're in good company. There's a lot of great talent out there right now that have been
Mhm.
searching for their next position for quite some time. So hopefully that's some relief, right?
Mhm.
The other thing too is as a recruiter, in a normal sort of hiring cycle where there is no downturn, it's just kind of more normal. Um, that would be more of a question that I would be concerned with, which is, okay, you've been out of work for whatever, 3 months, 6 months. Um, compared to the other folks that I might be looking at, that would raise some eyebrows. But for me, but then the next step would be to better understand what the situation is about, right? And granted, not all recruiters will do that. They'll just take things at
Mhm.
surface at face value and be like, oh, this person's been out of a job, and they might make some assumptions about that, right? But I guess the good news right now is that there's a lot of great talent out there. Like, so I kind of mentioned this earlier. Like, I was thinking about a year ago, I was thinking about going back into product management, but then I've been out of product management in a formal sense for the past 12 years because I was recruiting. And so I found that I was competing with people that were much more hireable than I was, and they were struggling for whatever 3, 6, 9 months. And I was like, man, I can't compete with these folks. Right? I've been out of product management role for anyway. So the point being is that there's a lot of folks out there that you're competing with that are also struggling. And so I would think, as a recruiter right now, it'd probably be less of a stigma against you. But that said, it's going to come up in the conversation when you get a recruiter or you get to a hiring manager or whoever's interviewing you, is what have you been doing with this time, right? And so you want to make sure, as a recruiter, I would like to hear that you've been productive with the time, right? And you have to define what productivity means for you, right? Productive could be, I don't know, traveling the world and soul searching or reinventing yourself, right? Or it could be, getting a part-time job or doing project-based work or something, right? Well, whatever productive means for you, that's what I would try to be able to articulate to the recruiter, because they want to know that you're able to make good use out of your time and what resources you have. That's what I would want to know, right? Are you able to take a dime and turn it into 15 cents, right? Like, are you able to take something and make it more, right? And so that's what I would be looking for. So if you can explain that break with something that is, in your mind, compelling and productive, I would try to focus on being able to articulate that.
Yeah, so sorry, I just have a follow-up. Like, so I've seen on LinkedIn that like people put like career breaks on their
Yeah.
LinkedIn. I don't know, like, is it something that you would recommend? And because I guess I can understand like if you on your resume, it doesn't, there's a gap. It doesn't always, there's so much context, right? It doesn't, people don't know unless you talk to them. But then at the
Yes.
same time, it's like, do they automatically like just filter you out? Like if you have this lengthy, um, like,
I would say less so now, right? Less so now than maybe 2 or 3 years ago, right? It's not, I think it's less of a stigma right now. And again, I'm speaking from my own experience, right? I think it's less of a stigma if somebody has a longer career break. But again, you should be able to address it because the question will come up. And even if it doesn't come up, you should make it come up because it's an opportunity for you to convey what you've been doing with the time, right? Have you been brushing up on your skills, learning new, learning about new industries? Have you been doing pro bono work or project-based work? Have you been doing the soul searching or what have you, right? Have you been spending time with your family? So whatever you deem productive for yourself, I would want to try to sort of share that story. Another thing came up, another question or another point that I wanted to make, just came to mind is I've seen some people do this. So for example, if you are able to do like project-based or consulting-based work for the company that you were or are currently with as sort of a ramp down, that could be helpful too, right? It could be helpful from a perspective of your confidence, right, while you do the job search, and also in terms of just on optically on paper what it looks like, right? Because instead of you, putting that today was your last day, right? You can kind of draw it out. So that might be something you're able to negotiate with your employer, your team, your hiring manager, right? If you could do some sort of consultative work for them, at least optically, it looks like you're still working for them, right? And so that might be a confidence booster for you. And the whole job search thing is part of it is managing your confidence, right? Because a lot of folks are a lot of folks are struggling, and most folks don't go through a job. I've met a lot of people that have 15, 20, 25 year amazing careers, like uber pedigree. The muscle that's atrophied, if they ever had it at all, was a job search muscle. And so when they get into that job search mode, it's completely atrophied or it's not non-existent. And so they feel like a fish out of water. And so how do they build that confidence, right? And so that confidence management thing, it's a thing, like, and you have to manage that. So if there's a way for you to draw out your transition by doing some consultative work, and even if it's pro bono, right, for your manager or whatever, right, it could help you sort of solidify the relationship, but also optically can help you on paper that you're still working there, and then also with your confidence, right? And so it's something to think about. I saw a few hands come up. Deep, Albert, or Deep, you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Eric, for hosting this.
Yeah,
It's my first time here. Uh, I'm I've been a product person for 10 years across startups and enterprise. I'm in Toronto, Canada. Um, I have been pretty fortunate to have had interviews and gone through multiple rounds, gotten silver medals a couple times. The thing I'm grappling with now is exploring different roles. So, namely, uh, biz ops or like business operations or revenue operations or customer success or customer experience as alternative angles for one, cash flow, and two, to get into companies that I'd like to work at as a different angle. Um, what are your thoughts on this? I just want to get your perspective and your take because I've been having
yeah,
interviews. I haven't gotten anything, so I'm still
yeah.
here. But I just want to sort of, I'm getting to a point where I want to be able to get something sooner than later, and I'm rethinking my strategy a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, where do I start with this? I think what you're going through and what you're considering is a pretty common sort of uh, fork in the road, I guess. As somebody is looking for a particular position that, for the past previous years they've had experience with, and they start struggling, and they start wondering, how do I broaden my search, or how do I get more activity with my search? And they consider either looking for different roles or different industries, right, that are a bit of a departure from what they've done previously. And so I guess my caution to that is, and this kind of goes in line with the sort of the whole NSA thing with respect to your candidate market fit statement. You have to be very careful that if you start going broader, so to speak, you start to dilute your sort of your brand positioning. Um, right. So I look at your LinkedIn profile, I look at your resume, and granted, you might be tailoring it. But are you a product manager or are you a biz ops guy? Like and that's what recruiters think about, right? Because they're looking to hire specialists. Recruiters, for the most part, are looking to hire specialists that are specialized for the job description that they're trying to fill. And so making a transition, in your case, as an example, from product management to business operations, whatever that might be, you know, um, you're going to have to tolerate potentially, like a lower salary or lower position to make that transition. And so, and transitions are not, they're fraught with their own sort of set of challenges as well, right? And so, um, so yeah, those would be my thoughts. If you have to be pretty strategic about, how you're going to make that transition and how you're going to present yourself to the market. And I would just caution you as far as being careful about diluting yourself too much in terms of just going where the opportunities are. I mean, it's certainly a strategy, but it's sort of you kind of have to weigh it. I guess again, from a recruiter's perspective, if I see somebody is making a transition, they have to be a little bit more compelling. There's a risk factor for the recruiter, right? That's part of the mindset. Is a recruiter's charged with finding the right folks and making a case for them internally, right? So if I have three candidates that I'm looking at and they're specialists that will fill this role, and then I have a fourth candidate that is maybe they're transitioning into this role and they don't necessarily have that sort of track record. That fourth candidate is going to be higher risk for me as a recruiter to present and build a case for, right? So, and it'll be more work for me as a recruiter, right? So if you're looking to position yourself into a transitionary into from product to business ops, for example, make it really easy on the recruiter for them to make a case for you. Make it obvious to them that your skills and your experience it translates into what they're looking for, right? Because that's what a recruiter is looking at when they're looking at any candidate, and it's much more difficult when they're looking at a candidate that's making a career role transition or industry transition. And so, if you can make that case for them, make it really easy to see, follow up with them on an email, sort of uh, recapping what you've talked about, and giving them almost a copy and paste of what they can present to their hiring manager, right?
Mhm.
that that will make it easier on me or your recruiter, right? So
Yeah.
those are some things to think about.
Yeah, no, actually, it's a great perspective. My perspective has been from a view of it being a stopgap between where I am now and the PM role that I want to go for at some point, but
Yeah,
need. So that's sort of been my perspective, but you're bang on, and that helps a lot in terms of just making it easy for the recruiter because they're making the case. And by making a transition, I have to be able to position myself in a way that de-risks my candidacy for them
yeah, yeah,
and makes me seem more specialized for that role, even if I come with a different background. So I need to sort of think about that and position myself accordingly. So that really helps. Appreciate that.
for sure. The other thing I would mention is that I assume that you're looking for a full-time position. Um, One thing you might consider is working sort of fractional. There's a lot of fractional. It's sort of the buzzword or the craze these days. Fractional CFOs, fractional CPOs, what have you. And there may be an opportunity for you to work sort of project-based work in a fractional capacity. But just want to throw that out there as something. There's groups out there. You should Google them or look them up. Fractionals United is one group, And I know that through the Slack group, there's a lot of leads that come in because some of these folks are doing fractional work. Let's say, for example, fractional HR. So they get at the executive or senior level, and they can get some visibility into what the team is looking for. And they'll come back to this fractional group in Slack and say, oh, this client of mine, they're looking for whatever, a director of product management. Does anybody know any good directors? So if you guys can try to orient yourself and sort of get into some of these fractional groups, and they usually manifest themselves as like a Slack group, right? There might be some on Facebook as well, but what have you, you guys can find them. But that's something to think about. Albert,
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Eric. I've yeah been in product, and I've got the very high demand silver medal a few times, and I try to get feedback from recruiters, but it's very general. It's like, oh, it's a very competitive pool. We really liked you. Do you have any tips how to get more detailed, actionable feedback
yeah,
to
yeah,
get
yeah.
process?
For sure. We talked about this last week, and it's a common problem. So you're in good company. One thing I would signal from the get-go, from the first touch with any recruiter, is that you listen to what they have to say, right? And you signal to them that you are proactive about soliciting feedback, and you apply that feedback, and you circle back with them about your application of the feedback, right? And you signal that from day one. What what I personally don't like as a recruiter is the candidate doesn't ask any feedback or doesn't solicit. They don't signal that they're open to any feedback throughout the, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 week process. And then only at the end when they are rejected or they're passed on, then it's like, oh, well, tell me the feedback. What happened? And at that point, I'm gun shy to share them with any feedback because I don't believe they're asking from a genuine place. I think they're asking from a place of like they just want to rebut it or they want to argue with me. And that exposes me as a recruiter. It exposes the company, right? I've been in situations where I provided feedback and I almost got threatened with a lawsuit, right? And so you need to signal from day one that as a candidate, you are very interested in feedback, right? And you don't even have to call it feedback. It's just any recommendations, any insights, that you're listening to what they have to offer and you're applying it, you're thinking critically about it, you're applying it to your practice, your search, your career, what have you, right? And then come time when you're looking for feed. The other thing too is like there's opportunities to get feedback or solicit feedback all across the process, right? It's even, even in the first conversation, it's like, we've been talking now for 30 minutes, you know, what do you think about my candidacy? How do I stack rank against the other folks that you might be considering, right? Like you can ask feedback very directly like that. And,
Mhm.
you know, so I hope that helps. Feedback is something that, yeah, again, most recruiters don't bother because it exposes them and it could put them in a situation where like at best, it's like they're just kind of uncomfortable. Like,
Mhm.
seeing somebody react to, yeah, there was other folks that were stronger than you or whatever, and so that's why a lot of recruiters just default to the generic feedback.
Hey,
Got it.
Eric, I have a little bit of a follow-up question on that, if
Sure,
I
Amber.
can. So I've had a couple of times where I get asked a really thoughtful question in the moment of an interview, and I give my best answer, but then I sit with it more, and I feel like I have a more articulate response after letting the thoughts percolate. What is your thought or your reaction to a candidate writing a note even a day or two later to say, hey, I was thinking about your question. And after further reflection, I would like to add to my answer or whatever. Like, what is that received positively or negatively?
So I'll tell you this again, most of my responses here they'll come from, obviously from the perspective of a recruiter. One is I'll tell you most people don't do that. And and I'm saying that to suggest that if you did that, it would reflect it would make you stand out,
Okay.
right? So that's one sort of thing. Like I'll share with you what people do, like what's common and what's uncommon. And a lot of times if you're doing something that's uncommon, it'll make you stand out. But it can make you stand out in a bad way or a good way, right? So one, I'll tell you that it'll make you stand out what you're suggesting there, because most people don't do that. Secondly, uh, depending on how you describe it or phrase it or communicate it, I would be inclined to receive that as making you stand out in a positive way, right?
Okay.
That would be me. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric, for having this today.
Sure.
Like a lot of others, I've been lucky enough to get to the point where you get to the silver medal round and you've gone through and not just spoken to the recruiter, but also the hiring manager and then some additional rounds of interviews and so on. And I really appreciated your answer about feedback with relation to that. And I appreciate, the struggles that you have as a recruiter as well, about giving that feedback. So, yeah, thank you for that, first of all. And then beyond that, I guess my question really just relates to a kind of almost as a follow-up to that. When it comes to communication with recruiters and you get to the point where you've gone through and you've had several interviews with multiple people, um, communication in relation to the recruiter versus the hiring manager and how best to sort of couch those types of communications. The recruiter
Yeah.
likes to be in the loop, I found, but also sometimes you want to build a relationship with the hiring manager also. Can you give any advice as far as how that goes and from an
Yeah.
advocacy perspective, like is the recruiter really trying to help you on the back end? I guess you
Yeah.
don't always
Yeah.
know, but
No,
yeah,
that's a really good question. Um, I'll start off by saying it really depends. One thing you should do is you should try to size up your recruiter. Are they a more senior person? Have they been working with that client? If they're an external recruiter that works for a recruiting firm or agency, you want to size them up. What's the agency's relationship with that client? How long have they been there? Does that recruiter have line of sight to the hiring manager?
right,
In other words, can the recruiter ask a direct question to the hiring manager? And does the hiring manager,
right,
are they able to, do they have a trust, rapport, and a connection there? Some recruiters, if they're third party, meaning external recruiters to the clients, they might be insulated between, with an account manager sitting between them and the hiring manager. And so ideally, it's a third party or even internal recruiter that you're working with. They've been working with the company or the client for a while. They know the hiring manager inside and out. They have a good relationship with the hiring manager. They've made hires for that particular role in the past, right? So this all falls on the spectrum, right? And so if the recruiter is a somebody that can be a strong advocate on your behalf, meaning they have line of sight, they know the client or the company inside and out, they've worked very closely with the hiring manager in the past, they've had success, that's ideal. In that situation, in any situation, I would try to build a good relationship with the recruiter, right? And I would probably be less inclined to go around the recruiter and just build an exclusive relationship with the hiring manager in that situation. The case where you might do that is if you're working with a third party recruiter that's a junior recruiter, has no line of sight. They're a year out of school, right? They're still learning about this and that. And you in that situation, you might put a little bit more muscle behind building a direct relationship with the hiring manager. And I think this goes without saying. Most recruiters don't have hiring authority. But depending on the recruiter, they could have a tremendous amount of influence,
yeah,
or they
yeah,
could have like virtually zero influence, right? It really depends, and that's part of why it's important to size up your recruiter, the recruiter that you're
and
working with,
obviously you don't want to damage that relationship either, but
right?
that's where it just becomes this fine balance I've found, the later
Yeah,
stages you get in the process, sometimes they do a great job for you and other times they're not really going to bat the way that they should.
yeah. If the hiring manager is open to giving you their email address,
Hmm.
I would I would include the recruiter, like copy the recruiter on any correspondence.
Yeah,
Um, Recruiters can get, their mindset is they want to manage the process. That's where they add value, right? they add value by managing the process and, so in some ways kind of insulating the hiring authorities, interviewers from the talent market. In some cases, that's really needed and valued by the hiring manager. Like the hiring manager doesn't want to deal with any of the logistics, the scheduling, this and that. They just want to show up with interviews, be prepared for the interviews, make sure that they're effective, and then provide feedback and input as part of the process. They don't want to run the process. Most hiring managers don't want to run the process, right? Most interviews don't want to run the process. And that's where the recruiter's value add is, right? They're running the process. And so to include them in the correspondence, it makes the recruiter feel like, they're doing their job kind of thing. And to not include them and they find out later, it might leave a mark. It might, right?
That
So you
makes
just have to
sense.
kind of,
Thank you.
yeah. So there's a bunch of questions in the chat here, and I really appreciate this, you guys. I'll let's see. I could probably go for another 5 minutes here. Let's see. Folks that drop questions in the chat here, if you want to just raise your hand or just kind of spit out the question, it'll take me a minute to kind of triage these questions here.
I'll go. This one's pretty
Tim,
nitty
all right,
gritty. And thanks for your advice so far. I really appreciate this.
sure.
It's kind of just comes down to resumes and professional summaries at the top of them. I've never had one before. They take up a lot of space. I don't know if because of ATS and everything like that, recruiters spending less time looking at a resume. Do you find that it's necessary to have a professional summary right at the top, or can you live without it?
That's a great question. I love it, Tim. So I would recommend it if you're doing it thoughtfully. If it's just generic, then I would be more inclined as a recruiter to read your summary on the top of your resume than a cover letter. And I've said this over and over in previous sessions. Look, I've been conditioned as a recruiter not to read cover letters because they're so generic, right? In my experience, I've found that the top section of a resume has tended to be a bit more customized. When I work with folks in terms of building their resumes or refining their resumes, I like to reserve that area and make it highly customizable for the job that you're applying to, right? You might tailor the rest of your resume a little bit, but the top part should be, it's almost like your pseudo cover letter, right? Because you're telling a narrative about your experience, and I like to use that as sort of so instead of talking about helping somebody write a resume, I'll tell you what I like to see as a recruiter. Because when I look at a resume, obviously I start from the top, but I like to see in that area, like what are sort of the marquee career accomplishments that this person has had, right? And I don't like when I see a bunch of fluffy words, like a bunch of superlatives, because it makes it more difficult for me to get to the meat of what this person has done and what they stand for, right? So I would tone down the superlatives. I would make it very direct and focused, and I would include quantifiable, just a handful, maybe 3 career accomplishments that you feel are marquee to your career as it's relevant to the job that you're applying to. That's what I like to see as a recruiter, right? Brandon, do you have a question?
Hey, Eric. Yeah, thanks for doing this. Happy New Year. I'll keep this short.
Yeah.
I had a few observations and experience as well last year and early this year. I feel like a lot of company, including startups and bigger companies, they're, how do I say, they become unsure about the exact candidate they're looking for, through job description and interview experience. So I had a couple of experiences, including myself and my colleagues. It's like, you go into the interview, you ask the recruiter and hiring manager what exactly skill sets and character they're looking for. But oftentimes you get this kind of vague answer. It's, oh, we want someone exceptional, hit the ground running, knock the ball off the park, XYZ. So it's really, really, for my personal, it's been very challenging uh, to kind of like perform during interview, to be that person without knowing what concrete skill set and character they're looking for. And obviously there is probably 10 more candidates they're interviewing at the same time. You know, you're not performing against the job description, you're outperforming the other 9 candidates. So
Yeah.
it's just really hard to know what that exceptional means for a role and job description. So often, like recently, I had this role which I interviewed last year, but then this year they changed the location from California to EU for London and Lisbon. So when I talked to the recruiter, I was like, hey, I noticed this location change. The response I got is, yeah, we prefer candidates from EU for cost reasons, but if we found someone exceptional in California, we're willing to open budgets and make a case out of it. So I came across a lot of the situation like this, which is it's tricky because I still want to go through an interview process, but at the same time, you've got to go up really super above and beyond. And towards the end, you still don't know if that's a fair evaluation.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your recommendation strategy
So
to?
you're mentioning a lot of different things, a lot of different ways you can go with this. I think the first thing that comes to mind though is being able to intelligently qualify your leads, right? It's almost like a sales
Right,
position. You have to qualify your leads because there's a million different ways you can go out there, and if you're not qualifying your leads, you could be spending, undue resources
exactly.
pursuing things that are just whatever, red herrings. I don't know what the term is, right? So you have to qualify your leads. And anytime you have an opportunity to talk with a recruiter, even leading up to that, I would do some homework, right? Talk to people that are already there, look at the glass door. If you can, get in touch with people that have worked there or are currently working there to kind of get some of the 411 on it, right? Um, and so if you could do that, that would help you tremendously, even leading up to a conversation with the recruiter, because it'll help inform what questions you could or should be asking in your time with that recruiter. Assuming the recruiter is the first point of contact, which it usually is in most cases, right? So yeah, I mean, you have to qualify your leads and making sure that the faster you can get to a no, the faster you can move on and dedicate your resources to the real maybes or the real yeses, right? And so I
What's
hope
this?
that helps,
Or
Brennan.
some? Yeah, absolutely. What are some of maybe top one or two like qualifying questions, like besides the JD and company
How long
research?
has this position been open? How long
Okay.
has this position been open, and what challenges have you faced in filling this role? I mean, that would be a first question I would ask a recruiter. Because if they tell you, this position's been open for 10 months. Oh, wow, 10 months. Like, what challenges have you been facing? You can fill a position in 2 weeks. You could fill a position in 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks with a fairly thoughtful and conscientious approach, right? So why has this position been open for 10 months? Is it because the hiring managers doesn't know what they're looking for? Is it because budgets have changed? Is it because somebody is not able to make a decision on this or that? Is it because there's multiple hiring authorities and they can't converge on the requirements? Is it because the position is not really open and you're just keeping it open for optics or something, right? Like, why has the position been open and what's your biggest challenge to filling it? They might be like, oh, the position's been open for 4 weeks. Here's the challenges we've been facing, right? And they might share some of that with you. And so if you could position yourself as a partner to helping them solve their problem, the recruiter's problem is they need to find candidates that are worthy of them presenting to their team, to their hiring manager. If you can be a partner in helping them solve that problem, it elevates you above just being a candidate, right? It's like you're a candidate, but you're also working with them as sort of a partner, right? So
Yeah.
that leaves an impression. Those are the folks that have left an impression on me when I've worked with them. They'll ask very probing questions and they're very thoughtful about it. And it's actually directly relevant to me doing a better job as a recruiter. So I
How
hope
do you
this
get
helps you
into?
guys.
Oh, thank you.
Brandon, did you have a last question? Or was that you, Joey?
It's hopefully everybody will appreciate this same question. How do you get into, through the recruiter, how do you get the signal from the hiring manager? Like, what exact signal the hiring manager is looking for, versus just guessing from the resume? From a job description.
How do you get a good read on what the hiring manager is really looking for,
Through the recruiters.
or the recruiter's really looking for?
No, through the recruiter. Like I want to learn what the hiring manager is looking for, so I can prepare for
Oh yeah, I mean, so you can ask that question of like what does your pipeline look like, and how many folks have you presented to the hiring manager?
it.
Because again, it almost positions you as somebody that can be helpful, right? You could signal to the recruiter like, I have a big network. I know a lot of folks. If it's not me, that's fine, but I could refer folks to you. Most candidates don't do that. I'll tell you right now, most candidates don't offer that. But if you signal that to them, and you concede to them like, look, I'm interested in the right fit. So if it's not me, that's okay. But I have a big network. I've been in this industry for 15 years, whatever, right? And I'm happy to share folks with you or refer folks to you if I know more clearly about what you're looking for. What are the last 3 candidates that you presented to the hiring manager that were not the right fit? Where did they fall out? Right? And they'll tell you, yeah, this person was great, but the hiring manager is really looking for this. Because I can give you some context of what the hiring manager is looking for.
That's really good. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah. Okay, you guys, I gotta run. I'm sorry. I'm gonna copy and paste all these questions that you've been asking in the chat here, and I'm gonna start up that question board that I was doing last year because I think that was pretty effective. But we record these and my assistant puts them up on YouTube, and so that you could look at a lot of the old the past recordings because there's a lot of good stuff in there. And anyway, hope to see you guys next week. Tell a friend, and Happy New Year to you all. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.